created my own little algorithms to do one thing or another, like disease states, a mortality algorithm. And
I think you will have a whole levels of robotics, that humanoid robots or non-humanoid robots, whatever the case is.
But the one that I really gravitated towards was Alteryx. Low code, no code, business intelligence stuff, data science, machine learning, things like that.
Audio, the text, and then there's big metaverse buzz. Everybody knows the metaverse.
Another week of AI.
Oof, another week of AI. It's going to be a great one today. This is something that I'm a big fan of, digital twin. You know what I'm actually a big fan of is people that have the advocacy mentality, right? So this is an AI podcast for the smart AI community, right? A and SMART stands for advocacy, right? We advocate for any specialist, they want to use any methods and do research and training for artificial intelligence and machine learning. We advocate for them and we teach them how to advocate for themselves, right? So this is a great conversation that I'm looking forward to have, because digital twin is really not on the surface in many minds. But today we're going to just talk about AI for as much as we can, but bring digital twin into the conversation. So today we have Omar. Thank you so much for making the time in your busy schedule. When people hear your background, they will know how busy you are. I bet everybody knows how busy you are as soon as they hear what it is that you're involved in. And then we have Masako. Masako, thank you so much. Again, same, you're busy and making time to push this conversation forward and get this conversation out in front of everybody. So Masako, we're talking backstage here and we're discussing a few things, but let me start with you. Give us your thought of the day, because your thoughts are profound. So let me and everybody here hear your thoughts, because
it's so funny when I don't know. I am always who I am, but when you put me on the spot, see, it's it's like it all, for me, it just all boils down to at the bottom of the pot, when all the water is gone, what truly is left. And what's left is the idea that we all have something that's deep within our hearts, that we know if we come together as a small group, that we can ignite a flame that'll burn so bright that we can create a massive change, because change needs to take place. And when it happens with people with heart that looks at their time schedule to say nothing other than, okay, I'll be there.
That's right.
I'll be there, because when we come together in a collective, because we care, that's where the change happens. And so that's why we're here today. How was that?
Well, awesome. You know how shoulder goes like this and all of a sudden it drops and you feel good, like, oh, feel relaxed now. That's it. That's how I feel.
Thank you.
And we got Omar and then we got Bobby, but I'm going to make some introduction, Omar. Don't worry, once you finish, because I know you're not going to cover everything because you're very humble about it. But you give us an in-depth introduction about you, because like I said, we come to these conversations to be inspired, and you are one of those people that, as soon as I met you, it was just like light bulb in my head, inspiration coming right out of you, So please tell us about yourself and make an introduction.
So academically, an engineer through and through, very logical thinker, but essentially I'm at the intersection of today as AI and cybersecurity and policy. And then that comes together in many ways, not only just from a practitioner point of view of building things and more ethically bringing people together and making things that are kind of better for all of us, including our next generation, but more about how we can kind of have a very big decision to make in life right now, and specifically around AI and how it's going to shape are, like you said, AI clones and AI twins, and how it's going to infect how we make decisions about other people when we ask questions that are coming from a machine. So all of that said, Mind Choice, essentially, I'm just focusing on helping be a small part of big change, like Misaka said, and that is the key, right? I'm a big believer in essentially just helping other people see their potential, and I completely believe in empowering them through a change of being a change agent and things like that. But I can go more details about what projects and what I've worked on as we have a conversation here today.
Okay, so I'm not going to do because throughout the conversation, you're going to talk more about yourself because that's what we hear. We want to hear more about you because you have a tremendous background in AI, and I'm talking about the way you were able to explain AI to me. I was just like, can I do the way you do it? I can't, but I'll like to try. But we also have Bobby joining us, and me and Bobby, I guess manufacturing is in our in his core. I kind of gravitated around him and figured out that's in my core as well. So, Bobby, how are you feeling, brother?
Feeling great today. It was a really great week, and I'm looking forward to another really great week. As far as technology and people, this past week has really been about people. Whenever you're rolling out new technologies, there's a lot of fear, spoken and unspoken. So I was just very proud of my team for taking the extra time to help people understand this is your new aid, not your replacement. So I'm just ecstatic.
Yeah. People are coming to realization about AI and sort of like augmentative intelligence rather than replacing intelligence, right? And I've been having a lot of conversation, and conversation is going from the people and the process and what's delivered through their process, whatever that is, right? People's have intelligence. If the process have intelligence, whatever is delivered through that intelligent process is also going to have some intelligence behind it. Can't beat that. That's great, right? So let's start the conversation of how do we frame the questions about what it is that we're discussing today, digital twins and manufacturing. So let's hear some thoughts and comments on digital twin, because we are here to educate anybody who's listening to say like, okay, if I had to know one thing about this one topic, what do I need to know? So anybody wants to go first, I'll let them go first so that way we can pick up the conversation from there. Any thoughts and comments?
Well, I think it's important when you're talking about digital twin, there's the technical aspect of it, right? How close it is to reality and the number of variables that you can capture. You'll never, be able to capture everything, but you can come as close as possible. But then it's the aspect of, well, what does it look like, right? So then comes the, let me demo this for you, or let me show you what that looks like, and having the right type of interface and having the right type of graphic representation. Because sometimes just because something looks cool doesn't mean that everyone gets it. So recently, the same instance that I'm speaking of, 2 young individuals on my team, and I mean early 20s, what they did was change the UI from what we normally use, to using an Unreal Engine to display it. And because the group that we were working with was of a different generation, they got it even quicker. Why? Because Unreal Engine is what? The way they're used to viewing the world, playing video games, etc.
Right.
And I just watched the knowledge transfer happen. It was almost instantaneous versus before you show, you demo, and then there was question was, does this represent that? Does that represent? They had none of those questions. It was like, got it. So just being open to, as smart as you think you are, whatever tools out there, that just be open to all of your team members having something to bring, technical or non-technical. There's no idea that is the end all be all for anyone. And just know that how you were brought up, just like any other form of communication, how you were brought up and how things were communicated to you is unique to you and your generation. But if you're talking to other generations, you need to consider that. So,
Yeah.
Great. One of my developers, super smart person, and he said, I used to always say it, but for the first time ever, I have really learned what it means to listen before I begin to do any work. So I'm ecstatic.
Wow. OG Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine is the OG. Really, really do love Unreal Engine.
Who would have thought, right?
Who would have thought? All right. Any follow-up to that?
No, that's great. Like I remember, like when I was young, right? I always wanted to know why time machines are super hard to build. So I talked to someone, and then they're like, "Look, the time machines are not that hard to build, or transportation and teletransportation team. The hard problem is not the fact that we can like take your current body and then turn it into bits. The idea is to recreate you on the other end,
Wow.
right? So it's not like, hey, if you want to get pressed to shreds and then have a DNA copy of your RNA or whatever, we have that technology. The question is, how do we build you back? That's not what we have, right? So the conversation of digital twins is quite interesting, and so though when you think about it from that terms of like time transport or teletransportation, you come to a realization, I don't want to be digital, like physically be transported. Because that's also available today. Like you can get co-pilots of all kinds of models of yourself. What is more important about digital transformation, going back to the teleportation problem, is how do I get the same metaphysical values that I represent? My empathy, my collaborative skills, my behavior around uncertainty, around change in political and geopolitics, to things that are unknown, and uncertainty that I see in Asif's eyes and my eyes. And that is a part of digital twin that I'm very interested in. That how do we make sure that our virtual representations are not just basically a copy of because that's easy to do. How do we make sure that our metaphysical values are transferred over? So when we read the text and we read and you are actually not only just talking to a co-pilot, that's my version, is equally empathetic. It doesn't hallucinate. It comes to back to those technical problems that we have. And that's where, going back to the teleportation problem, it's not hard to recreate, to destroy you and recreate your RNA, but is it going to look like you? And that's where I'm kind of focusing on, and honestly, the truth of, and there is no soft solution to this. And this basically comes down to making sure that the underlying formula, the fabric of the new technologies that do allow digital twins, they have the regulations from law, they have the guardrails, and then they have our authentic self when we do brand it as a digital twins. And that to me is kind of like where we are in a fascinating point of view, that how do we kind of bring all those three things together? I don't want an asshole version of myself walking around in AI. Right? I don't want people to think that I'm a horrible human being. I probably would want him to be better than I am. Most people don't like me, right? So I'll stop here and we can talk more about that. And Masako, you probably have a lot of thoughts about that too.
Yeah, Mary, it's interesting that you say that, because just listening to you, I'll whenever I talk to groups of parents, I'll tell them, I was like, when I meet a child, if a child is an asshole, that means you're an asshole.
Exactly.
Bottom line. So if you're good and you have a good heart and you do good things, oftentimes your children are that way. So thinking about what we're doing in life and how it's translating through time, the question is what impact do we want to have through time? So when we're creating those digital twins, how can we enhance the next best version of ourselves within our twin, for us to do those things that we could only imagine doing, which now we could do them. Right?
Exactly. And I think it goes back to the age-old problem of legacy, right? from all the way to Obama being obsessed about a legacy to Dr. Evil and Austin Power films, right? Dr. Evil wants a Dr. Evil child. And like you said, Saka, very powerfully, digital twins are no different than how we want to bring up and raise or rear our children. And you probably can talk about that more than I can, but that's exactly how we want them. We want them to be better. We want them to be smarter. We want them to be more empathetic. We want them to still be more competitive than we were. So, how do you think that could happen, like in digital realm? I really am not able to.
Well, I believe, I'm glad we're talking about this, because we have to think, when we think about where we're going in the future, we think about what our history has looked like. And so then when considering policy, which is something that you have been working in policy, then we have to look at what has laid the groundwork, what hasn't worked. And so if we know what hasn't worked, we can toy around with the idea of what will work and what does that look like, and then being strategic and intentional with that strategy on creating something that's better than we could have ever imagined. Because now we take that evil out of it and we think about what we're collaborating for and what change we are going to make within our communities across the globe. Like really asking that question, okay, what is our best next steps that we may not do within our flesh, but we can do as a twin?
Yeah. I think the digital twin piece of it, it's to augment the way we are right now. But the problem does arise, what happens once we perish and that digital twin lives on? So this becomes an expert system of Bobby, yet this is a learner system that is no longer learning from Bobby, but it's just behaving on its own accord. So, we can all talk about digital twin in so many ways. I think one of the kind of spotlight example that I've used on digital twin is that somebody's best friend passed away, and they created this app where they took all the text messaging between those two persons and continued that conversation once that person has passed. So that's a digital twin inside of a text messaging, right? Text messaging, the way they will text you back, the way they will have the conversation, because it has all the memories of past text for however many decades, right? So it's a digital twin in a spectrum, right? When we're talking about a Flash and us, Flash and digital twin, we get sort of a challenge from that standard that Omar is talking about, right? I want that system to be better than the way I am right now. But does that system continues to get improved over time, once you no longer have eyes on it, right? Does it deviate into something not necessarily productive or less than that, right? Less than productive, but harmful. So digital twin, I find it fascinating because there's so much contribution digital twin already does. It's just that we don't label it as digital twin, right? Because if it's augmenting intelligence, it's like a dashboard in your car. You don't necessarily open up your engine every day to figure out what's going on wrong with your engine in your car. It's that dashboard that's telling you the engine is failing, right? That's a digital twin version of that car somehow, right? Because it's giving you an early detection and an alert to what's happening to a surrounding that you are occupied in, say, good part of the day, right? In your house, if there's an intrusion, that's a digital twin, right? So I go through that nitty gritty of everything digital twin, but what we're talking about here is the highest level of that digital twin, right? It's like now, let's say, for example, let's not talk about Flash and digital twin, but what if I was a CBP, I was a Custom Border Patrol agent, and now there's a digital twin of me doing the work that I do with, say, thousands of people coming through the airport line every day, right? And what if there is a digital twin of a Starbucks barista, right? Barista is the one that's arranging all the order taking and handing out, distributing those orders, but there's a person in the middle that's actually doing all the manual work, right? The digital twin is a wide spectrum, but the ultimate digital twin that we are working towards is to have an expert system that learns over time and it does exactly the way we would do things, right? It's able to do that. I heard Bobby say something.
I said I would have to caveat that because when we talk about a digital twin, we have to consider the fact that honesty is not something as humans we are good at. We're not. So if you, for example, if you were to set up, just like if you made a digital twin of you, you'll say, I don't talk like that. I don't sound like that. I don't. Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
We all have consensus.
And you're not ready to fully embrace that. And that same thing happens in corporations, right? And whether it's hubris, arrogance, denial, all of the things that come with us when we look at technology, and technology just is that neural network moving faster, right? Before maybe you get a chance to correct. So when you're designing, you got to kind of lose a lot of you and kind of just take it from a fact-based kind of situation. Morals and values change over time. Will your digital twin change over time? When we talk, generally we'll say evil or bad, but yeah, it's not so much that. If you told me my priority was to win, I'm going to win. If you told me my priority was faster, it's faster. And all of us have all of these flaws within us. It's just our physical limitations prevent it from happening. Case in point. One time, number one grocery store in the United States was a company called the Atlantic and Pacific Tea Trading Company, A&P. A&P was unstoppable, right? They got outpaced. They did studies, didn't pay attention to their own studies. They said, no, people don't want to go to the butcher and the baker. They want it all up in one place. No, they want this department over here and that department over there. They want to be treated in a certain way. They want their fruits and vegetables as soon as they come in the door. They were number one, didn't listen to any of it. They paid for the studies. But you know who did? A little company called Kroger. We've seen it again and again. Kmart, Walmart should not exist. Sears, a whole lot of stores should not exist. Because at some point, you stop being honest with you and stop trying to grow. My question for all of us is, do you think it's possible that can happen with digital twins?
I'm going to say yes, because it goes back to, if we're going to let's look at the human side of things first, okay? Because for myself, I always say, oh man, if people were like me, the world would be a much better place. Because I think of myself as an evolved person, right? Someone that I really do my best to be my God self. I'm not there completely, but I know as I function in a space where I'm completely source, then that means that I am excelling on all cylinders and we're working in a culture of collaboration. And then I'm able to hold the mirror to others that I encounter so they can evolve to their highest, best place in life, and so on and so forth. We continue to do those things as we evolve. So as a twin, I feel like if you have good and good, then you're only going to be better. But if you have those dark places within you that nobody sees, that you don't even like to show, but you know that they're there, then those things are going to be highlighted. Those things are always going to be highlighted. That's why we, as humans, right, to have humanity, that's why we have to be in a headspace where we are looking to collaborate with one another, to elevate one another as a humanity. But when we hide those things from ourselves because we don't want to see them, even know that they are there, it does not give us an opportunity to evolve into a higher state. So until we are ready to evolve into a higher state, the digital twin is going to be just as we are. If there's fears, it'll highlight the fears.
That's really a good way to view things, because especially if we look at, and we got policies in place, we got laws in place. This is a great time in history in one regard specifically. It shows that you can have everything in place. And if the right people decide we ain't following none of that, then guess what? You might as well not have it in place, right? So if computers are mimicking us, We be like, oh, it's going rogue. No, it's going to us. We do these same things. Like, I'm like, why wouldn't it do that? Did you just not see, you know what I mean, what we just did? And again, in that whole scenario, that is part of the full array of who we are. Sometimes I'm very kind, and if I'm in the house and I see a fly, I will try to capture it and release it outside. But if it lands on my face, it's dead, right? So what is that? But it's true, right? So again, in digital form, how we model the things that we do and say and the things that we use, they have the good side of us, but they have a lot of things that we have. How do we keep those best qualities, but filter out some of the more challenging qualities electronically when we have challenges doing it ourselves? Omar, what do you think?
Well, I think that's a very interesting and loaded question you ask, and I love the situation, the answer Masaka gave about, it is possible. We all strive to be better, and especially when there's something on the line. And I think we can kind of look it back, like when like Web 2.0 happened in early 2008. The conversation went from singular static pages to actually socialization on the internet. Right, and our digital twin to a certain extent was created, and we know from all the way from our Reddit avatars to all the way to metaverse character space. When the studies have shown day after day that essentially when there is something on the line, like Masaka said, things do get better. And so when you do have things where you're attributable online, and that goes back to yourself, your digital twin will be training to be better. When we anonymously can do things in real life and physical life and not in virtual, we will do things. We will take the right turn on the red when we know it says do not do that, right? A lot of people do that. So when it's attributable, you will be called out for it, like on Reddit, and you have social credit, where you have metaverse and you're actually can go back to your physical digital twin. It does come down to, like you said, laws and regulation, but the framework is slightly different and more nuanced in many ways. And there are a lot of laws and regulation now, for example, in watching pornographic material in Texas to Virginia, that this is the kind of stuff people are trying to kind of say, like revenge laws, right? There's a lot of framework around this already. So it's a very valid concern, but at the same time, there's a lot of good social credit systems. There's a lot of attributable things that we can do, identity verification. But the good news is the practitioner, the underlying technology from identity proofing to identity verification to making sure digital realms and AI are kind of like, tapered down to do not do certain things that we wouldn't do or we were not named to be associated exist. So it's a matter of behavior recognition. It's a matter of self-training, like Masaka, like you can speak about it, like you deal with kids all day long. So, and I'm not a parent, but you guys are, you would probably know way more than me that how to make sure that one thing we teach our kids is accountability, because accountability just literally just means that what you do is your actions, regardless if they're 2 years or school, they're connected to you when you come home or you're outside. And that particular sense of, if you wanted to make it into digital technological terms, like say, create a human ledger or create a blockchain of actions, right? Now we connect digital twin technologies to attributable facts. That just needs to come around. When it comes around, it'll flourish, because that's how we will be accountable.
I think you got to describe a little bit more policy to us, because you're the policy subject matter expert. I got to ask you about that. So, policies, literally, what I'm hearing right now is that the state is like, I always say this, like, we don't have a social contract that we signed at birth. Right. Life would have been so much easier if you were born with a pen in your mouth rather than a silver spoon or whatever. You had a pen, and as soon as you're born, you read a contract and you sign it like, yep, I'm ready to go on with that, right? But we all agree. But we didn't agree to any of this, right? So when it comes to policy writing, shine some light into some of the things that you've experienced, well, I'm not gonna, take your spot, but you are the subject matter expert. Please enlighten us.
So I think and Bobby and everyone, I am at Kennedy at Harvard School, specifically talking about policy and specifically how it gets codified through our discussions in Harvard Innovation Lab and at HBS and specifically at HLS, where we're having continuous conversations about how this AI stuff is going to be ingrained in policy, to guardrails, to human function, and essentially gets woven into the fabrics of our society. And the policy part essentially comes in as from the digital twin is, I think, like we're going back to recreation of ourselves. On the other side of the medium is that one is has to be attributable to a human. And that is all the way from HR making decisions for hiring or letting go of someone, has to make sure that even though your digital twin makes a decision, the decision is equally weighed with certain names and identities that are real. And other policy concerns that we are also looking at specifically is the states' rights and the federal rights, and specifically global. And there is a concept in economics called externalities. Essentially, what's a negative production or a positive production of AI, and what the bystander effect of my AI or my digital twin will have on you. And that's a very, very basic conversation in Econ 101, if you ever took in high school, is that when you're polluting or you're smoking, there's a secondhand effect. Now that externality or negative externality from AI exists. And that policy needs to exist so we can make sure the rightward shift in supply and the demand of our digital twin is at the more effective market efficiency quantity versus is at the higher rate where we are affecting other people. And there's all kinds of issues around that, and some of the policies specifically is to limit the amount of AI, which means we take some types of models offline. We cannot have Hugging Face models that have no responsible AI. We have to have certain benchmarks of what models get used for technologies that can represent and make decisions for you. And so when we start putting together the strategic vision of essentially attributable, making sure the goal is to kind of shift the demand and the supply on the AI side to be in the right negatives to compensate for the externalities, there are tactical things: model selection, model training, model abstract data, attributable, not attributable facts. And those things are all coming together. And we can go more into policy, but that's how it works.
I mean, in all sense, this is about like 90th episode of this podcast. We have done so much of this conversation of safety, security, and privacy. The people's employment, humanoid robots, OSHA safety. You can just go in so many layers, but really, what's missing right now is people's awareness of how dramatically AI is moving, right? How dramatically AI is being pushed into the ecosystem just to see how the ecosystem will react to it, right? And that ecosystem, if it doesn't react well, you're going to have some disasters that we were like, you know what? We didn't even have it on the books. We don't even know how to respond to this. It's sort of like a fire that fire department has never seen before, right? So really appreciate everything you do in the policy sides of things, because policy is what we can kind of go back and say, we talked about this and this is the outcome that we expected. And having just that policy, I think in military terms, just knowing that, I at least told you what are some of the outcome is. Now you just have to figure out what the anomaly of that outcome that even policy didn't catch. Now let's write more policies so that way, we can cover that anomalies. There's always the one guy that has to screw it up for everybody, right?
Well, there's two parts to that, right? Because oftentimes when a person just says, talk about policy and then translation of that policy, right? The codification of the policy, really we shorten things down. Originally it used to be when you file policy, the file numbers used to say policy and precedent right? So what precedent has been set? You have a set policy, but everyone's always trying to ride the edge. What things have stood up in court? So what a policy means to me and you has changed over time by what precedent has been set, right? So for example is when you talk about treating people equally, but now we're talking about Delta, Walmart, looking at you as an individual and determining how much you should pay for those eggs because you can probably afford it. I'm just saying, right? So that was not something we thought about. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, yeah, how do these things connect, if at all, right? So once you put policy in place, you have to see, because even with the best of intentions, the world changes, right? The world changes. So now in the age that we're living, do we need, question for the group, do we need some type of digital governance system to augment? Because if you wait on us to figure out the whole story of what's really happening, oh, it's a wrap before we get a hold of it. So in this age, do we need digital governance? Not just a set of rules and then people trying to determine, did a system violate the rules? But as Omar was saying, with all of the nuance there, do you need better digital governance tools than we currently have? Question.
Go ahead, Sam.
That's the big aha moment.
Aha moment, yeah.
You're like, because then it goes back because the governance is set from a group, right? And so if you're creating a new digital governance, who's setting it? Are you gathering people from across the globe to say we're going to come together for the purpose of putting this governance piece in place in order for us to eliminate the bias that shows up because it's unbiased, because it's biased already? So what does that look like? I know for policy, you discuss, you speak about precedents. Okay, this is what we're going to focus on, but what are truly the steps? Like, who has been governing thus far? We know that it hasn't been governed, at least by the way it appears.
Yeah. Here's my answer. I.
No, but that's a true question, because it gets back to that point, at least for me, because it has to be for the collective. The question must be, what are our best next steps? And so the question about the best next steps is, who is this benefiting?
I think here's an opportunity that.
Wait a minute, Asif, because when we ask the question of who it's benefiting, from historically, we're looking at the haves and the have-mores, right? Because collectively, people would say, well, everybody has the same opportunity, especially in this country. We all have the same opportunity to grow and prosper and do the things. But literally, it is the haves and the have-mores, because it's that mindset. So if you have not been in the rooms where you believe that what your thought is matters, how you govern things matters, if you're not in the space to even have the conversation, then who cares about you? Because you don't have representation.
I just quickly wanted to bring up the fact that we've had this opportunity to talk about this for the last 20, 25 years, where in digital space, that digital footprint, somebody had more of that digital footprint about me than I did. I mean, as in they took more of my digital footprint and used it against me than I didn't have any of this digital footprint. And I didn't even know that it existed. And I did not say anything, even once I found out how much the social media platforms are collecting information about me and creating a digital twin of me that I have no access to. I could not tell that company that, look, my Google research was for study purposes. You cannot take that into account to say that's Asif's personality. And you can imagine what I'm researching here. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem that I can tell you right now that we're not even facing. And that is a major issue, because somebody has 5,000 points of information about me, and I don't even have 5 of them. And I have no control over those 5,000, right? That's a digital twin that already exists in the space. Somebody has a profile about me that even I cannot create. It has all the browser information. It has all the information where I've been to. It has all the information about everything I did in my life or researched in my life. You know, yeah, I think have and have more. I love that analogy. It kind of falls down on me personally, right? To be part of that conversation. And I think this is what this whole community is about, that you have to be able to advocate for yourself, right? That SMART behind me, the A is for advocating for yourself, and you have to advocate for any purposes. Like if you're a specialist that is I don't know, lawyer, you are a person who's in the Wall Street doing stock exchange, whatever the case is, you are a specialist, and you have to be able to advocate for yourself. And once you advocate, all of a sudden you see a shift in that digital space where everybody's able to say, you know what, this is how digital space should look like, right? Rather than, like you said, everybody has internet, but somebody else really has the internet. Like they have it under their fingernail. Like literally they're able to control so many things happening in an inner space. And I guess the examples comes and goes, but the digital twin version of it already exists behind the web browsers that we're in, right?
Yeah, I think people show up in general everyday life thinking that something will not ever happen to them. And so when you live an intentional life, like Amar is doing, with the policy, you're taking part in creating the decision and doing your due diligence to review things historically and then asking the question, okay, how can we do this better? And I believe if each of us shows up in a space where, we're truly curious about what's happening and what our best next steps are, and really being intentional about living on purpose, I think that's when things change.
Now, I think that I think this is a very interesting question. I think that's something that we been grappling with a long time, right? Traditionally, the idea that one of the rules of I'm going to go back to governance thing. That's very loaded, and that's the conversations at the policy centers we always have. And one of the things that we've been thinking about is that are the policies that are going to come around for digital realm and specifically for AI, are they going to be as partisan as that we have for our cities that we live in, the communities that we live in, the countries that we live in? Or are they going to be more like, let's just say, non-religious or non-denomination based on Anglo-Saxon culture that we are living in here in America, where it's going to be based out of some religious beliefs? And it's interesting because the AI enables that, right? And the AI can enable a very different digital twin realm and the governance center with no set of values that you and I probably could associate. Obviously, it does believe in honesty and fairness and respect, but it probably does not believe in a God, right? It probably doesn't believe in a capitalistic society. In fact, traditional studies have always shown the internet is actually more communist and socialist environment than actually capitalist, right? So when we start talking about policies, are they going to be like a digital twin policies of what our governance of our physical world looks like today, or are they going to be a new set of realm of policies? So if you go back to, like, say, the days of 2004 and 2005, when Facebook and eBay are really big, eBay had to kind of go through the specific case study also. Our Airbnb ecosystem had to go through this in early 2012. How do you create governance around? But in both of those scenarios, the real actors were still humans. Now, when we go into agentic AI and we're talking about agents taking actions that have life and death decisions, what moral system did they actually abide by? Because that generates the policies. It's a really interesting question, and that's what people are talking about. And the fear generally is that what if the governance system that realms that is actually takes place or takes a hold, one, meets what we do in real life, and what if it's not? You'll be horrified because people are not really used to that change. Two, what if it prioritized specific type of people who have traditionally been given priority in culture, specifically because of race and skin color? Or worse is more horrifying, or people are afraid of, what if it gives priority to people that have been underrepresented, and what if they have the inverse effect and they get more popular? So a lot of the policies today that are being discussed and be created are really at the forefront of like, there is this really non-human agents that are going to take values, create a value system, and we better get ahead of this right now, because of digital twins, that governance system is not going to look like what we have today. And that's why this conversation is so powerful, right? And going back to ANP, I know I there's a I don't know if you read the story, a short story about Dykes, about girls walking into ANP. It's a great great short story. I think that if you ever want to listen to why ANP was great at the time, there's a really a great short story about it when a couple of girls walk into the store. But it also outlines, that the value system that we associate with a brand and a culture is very much a nostalgic effect. It is not what really truly is. So we tend to fake ourselves, and I want to stop here. But that is not what's going to happen in the digital realm. We're not going to be able to manipulate it that easily, because humans do believe things very quickly, and whereas machines don't.
Oof. Yeah. This is how the policymakers talk right there.
No.
One,
I do have to drop, though.
4.
No, and I do have to drop, guys. But do read that short story by ANP. That's one of my favorite short stories of all time. And it's Dykes. But I was pleasure to be here. Thank you. It's a little late on East Coast, and Misaka and Bobby, and Unreal Engine is great. And it's very powerful. I completely agree. Working in M&E was great. But also, we'll stay in touch and have a great conversation, guys. Signing off here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. That was great.
Exactly. And a policymaker thinks differently, right? Because we're just living through life, and here we are, somebody observing life as it has been lived and as it can be lived. What are the potential? That's what I love about policies, is that you're really taking a lot of information and making sense out of it, like how it was, how it should be. But one things that keep coming up to me, and I think that's somebody that's not really associated with artificial intelligence, machine learning might really enjoy hearing, is that what we are talking about here is literally what machine learning has done for hundreds of years, right? Analyzing these sort of potentials and degradation or possibilities versus downgrading, right? Whatever the case is, AI, machine learning, that's what machine learning is doing. There's a Markov's, stats that you can look up, hidden Markov chain, right? Like those sort of things are powerful statistics that have driven like these AIs to do amazing amount of things. And just to give you one example of HMM is hidden Markov that actually allows you to make phone calls on your cell phone. And we've been using it for 20, 30 years at this point. And over time, we have corrected this HMM to help us make better phone calls, right? Some areas, if you have AT&T and Verizon, you might not. Anytime you get a best service and you're not losing quality of conversation with the other side, it's because of this HMM, the hidden Markov chain in the middle, that's allowing you to have a quality conversation using AI machine learning, right? So having said that, right, the statistics behind it, one of the things that I find that is not necessarily, I wouldn't label it as dangerous or just very positive, but we have to be aware of it, is that we used the smallest sample set in order to live our life off of the big data set that we have. There's a giant amount of data set, and we use the smallest data set to come to a single conclusion, either on a daily basis or for our lengthy period of life, right? I see Bobby smiling about that, because that's the power of understanding statistics, is that statistics is never to give you 100% of the information, but rather take that one simple 1% of the stat and making decisions off of it, right? But that's not how it feels in the brain. But if you reverse it, all of a sudden you realize, wait a second, I was only, let me just use one example that maybe everybody can associate with. Let's say, for example, you dislike somebody, but if you reverse engineer from disliking that person, all of a sudden you can realize you dislike so many other character traits that this person probably represented. And those are a lot of small sets of data that linked you to that disliking of that one person that you probably just met a few seconds ago, right? So this happens with every single part of our decision making, right? Be it somebody's ability to do something, have something, or we don't have something and they have something. Those are small sample sets that we make our decisions off of, and that's powerful. That's good to know, because machine learning and AI is what we're talking about. And guess what? If we put machine learning in charge or AI in charge, AI is not going to do anything different. It's just going to take that small sample set.
Yeah, Steve, I'm listening to you, and while I'm listening to you use a comparison on, I'm thinking about the percentage of the brain that each of us uses, right? And then not really, I feel like we encounter more in our lives where we think that whatever is happening, that it won't happen to us when it comes, to tragedy and things of that nature. And how many of us have encountered people where there's something about them that we just don't like? So if we think about that one something, which is essentially a culmination of several small things, and those small things could be data points. And every person that we have encountered throughout the globe, wherever we have traveled, there was something within that space of those data points that we did not identify, that rubbed us the wrong way. And so I challenge us to say, well, there is something within them that is uncovered in us that we have yet to discover.
Yeah.
And that's that nuance. There's something within us that we don't care for, that we're not even aware of what that small thing is, but we cannot stand it.
Right.
So what if we looked with that source eye, right? That eye of all creation, to say, okay, what is this?
Yeah.
What is this that has me so perplexed that it is enabling me from standing face to face with something to discover what's next? Because I want to challenge us to think that it's not something that we don't like. However, it's something that's undiscovered within us that we need to move through to get to the next side. So when it comes to AI, instead of fearing it, being able to look at it with an eye, right? Look at it with an eye to say, okay, what is it within this space that isn't new?
Yeah.
It's been here for decades, but we were unaware of it because the space in our life that we were in had nothing to do with AI, but now AI is everywhere. AI this, AI that. World of Wars the other day that came on TV. Everything has something to do with artificial intelligence, machine learning. It's not new. It just happens to be the conversation that's happening right now. So I would say challenge yourselves. Be curious.
Yep.
Even to the point for those things that you don't care for certain people, be curious. What is it about you that rubs me the wrong way? Right? Because it's here. It's that eye. It's that eye. We're trying to
reverse it. What is it about you that makes me like you that much? Right? The association has always been there. Something about us as a friend, as a group of people that are spending time together is because of something. The small sample sets of information that just happen to be in front of one person, and all of a sudden there is that like, right? If I can teach one thing about machine learning to anybody, is that machine learning does what our brain does without us realizing what our brain is doing, right? So of course there's a neural network that people will talk about. Well, that's what brain does neural network wise. But a neural network has a lot of the weights and bias. And I think I mentioned that before in this podcast, but the weights and bias is not as easy as just saying weights and bias. So let's say, for example, a like part of it, right? So I'll give this theory of 1,000 brain theory, which is that our brain is not just a single brain. It's actually working like 1,000 different brains all at once. 1,000 is just like an example of how many brains we're talking about. It's actually millions. So what that means is that we actually like almost everything. So if you acknowledge something, that means you're already liking it. You start off with liking it. But because of the practice of not liking everything, your brain goes through this weights and bias, which is that neural network path to say, I just dislike a lot of things. So most of your personality becomes, I just dislike majority of things. I like few things. Or it goes the opposite way. I like a lot of things. I dislike few things. So everything starts with a like, because in order for us to acknowledge something that exists physically, or acknowledge something that is sort of like a brain wave, like your neuron is firing because you're getting spooky senses, those things are really based off of your previous life experience, right? Previous sets of information that is part of your neural network. So as neural network is going through, and just to give you an example of neural network, your iPhone has about 200 neural networks use cases inside of it, 200, right? That's a lot of neural network working to make your iPhone experience that great. Because if your iPhone didn't have that 200 neural networks, you would probably say like, that's a dumb phone. So what makes it smart is this neural networks, right? And you will see it. It's NPC. It's literally on majority of the devices that you use today has NPCs, neural processing computing. So the reason I say all of that is because it's the way our brain thinks and amount of ways our brain have to think, right? So the labeling of things is a major computational part, right? So if you acknowledge something, if you mislabel it, all of a sudden the weight changes, right? We have to learn that early in life. And guess what else have to learn that early in life? AI machine learning system. Because if you start teaching it based on saying, this equals dislike and this equals kill and murder, AI system will stack, because the AI system starts off as a learner system that becomes expert over time. And it becomes expert as in it keeps learning and keeps doing those expert things over and over. So if it becomes an expert at disliking, it will continuously dislike. And if it dislikes to a point that it kills and murders, it kills and murders, right? So the same thing. It's like, you teach it on the stock market to say, you are going to learn so much that you're going to become an expert of making $1 billion every second because stock market. It applies to all the things possible with AI machine learning. If you're going to learn a car, you're going to learn it so good that all you're going to do is drive really, really great. Right? Yeah. So I'm just going to leave it at that, because that's something is worth investigating about ourselves, but also about AI machine learning.
Well, it was like Bobby was saying earlier with regard to, the digital twin, and will it become all of the parts that we dislike about ourselves, or will it evolve into something glorious?
We are small sets of ourselves, right? And AI is learning that small set just like as much as it will learn the big sets.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Bobby?
Yeah, I think yes to all of the above. The great unknown is still unknown. If we're talking now, we're talking about trillions of data sets, right? Well, someone recently asked me, when will I think it'll be a much better tool? I said, I don't know when, probably sooner than we think, but you need to add a whole lot more zeros, because right now I find myself dealing with a toddler, right? Sometimes they get it and you say yay, sometimes they surely don't, and you get an unexpected result. So, just know the thing about it is, if you were to get a child, do you want a child that you can raise and kind of monitor and at least know most of what went into that child? Or do you want to get one that he just shows up at 16 and you have no idea?
So it's interesting. It's interesting, Bobby. That's an excellent compare and contrast, if you will, because with the Royal, I see all of me in her.
Wow.
All of me. And so it helps me be better, because if I'm better, she's better. And so within me becoming better, I literally watch the evolution of her day by day.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah.
But I'm being
awesome. Yeah.
But I'm being intentional. Are we being intentional with the AI, with the
right.
building the model?
Well, that's a good question. So the thing is, where we are now is you have the academians and the politicians who think, right? You got the futurists who think one way, and then you got, the industrial complex that thinks an entirely different way. So right now, when you hear about laws being passed to block any blocking of the development of AI, is simply because right now no country wants to be left behind, no matter what the risk, because there is no, global, not nationwide, but global governance that says what's right and left, and then we can catch a bad actor. Eh, just from, y'all know, some of the jobs that I had that I got, that it's like, our competitors don't block themselves, so we won't block ourselves. Yeah, but the competitors, the people doing it, if they don't get it right, they die. So, you know what I mean? So
Right.
how much like our competitors do we want to be?
Right.
So
Right.
it's interesting. And that being the case, different motivation, right? Different motivation, different governance, but at the same time, this is a race you don't want to lose. Last time we were in a race like this, seriously in a race like this, Mr. Oppenheimer said he regretted some of the things.
Yeah.
Not to be gloom and doom, this can turn out wonderful.
Right, but you have to look at worst case scenario to actually do true planning.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's
So-
why I'm the negative Nancy in any conversation I'm in, because I'm looking at continuity of operations planning. I'm looking at the vulnerability assessment. And if I don't do that, somebody else will have to, right? Somebody's got to be a negative Nancy in the room, because if you cannot meet the assumption of the worst, right? And everybody here cannot say, I will take that risk. Majority has to vote, right? Because I have to present that assumption and somebody has to label it with, this is a risk worth taking, right? And if it isn't, guys, I think we need to do something different, right?
Yeah.
But I think Bobby said something, which is like academia, industry, and media, right? I'll put the politicians in the media realm because, this is sort of like a 8-hour events for them, right? But for the industry, it's a lifelong experience of either you survive or you don't, right? Either you made that revenue where you can employ thousands of people or don't, right? Or you cut 10,000 people and go out of business, that kind of situation. So media, you can leave that out, but academia is in a whole other ballpark because it's not a life or death situation for them. They're just studying and saying an inconclusive answer is, they don't even know what's a yes or no. It's mostly maybe, right? But then again, industry is the one that gets impacted the most, right? Either you're in business, you're competing very well, and if you compete very well, something, right? Yeah, good or bad outcome, right? Quarter one is not that great. Quarter four might be better, but who knows? So you have a whole lot of things that the industry has to deal with. And if I can connect the dot here between digital twin and industry, industry right now lives off of this thing called business intelligence. Literally, however you want to say so many things, you can just boil it down to business intelligence. Do you have an understanding of what's happening in your business? And do you understand if you put this in your business, this the output's going to be right? So if you have business intelligence that works very well, which most people call a dashboard, but if in your dashboard, are you able to do predictive analytics? Are you able to do simulation? Are you able to create that scenario? Like in financial industry, they do Monte Carlo scenario, right? So you have all sorts of simulation capabilities for industry that can tell industry that, hey, given your business intelligence, this is what the outcome of your business is, right? As a vulnerability assessment guy, I'll come up with hundreds of scenarios, right? But like, oh, add all that in there. I'm like, no, let's put 5 of these because 100 is that's too much, right? But that's okay because 5 is better than nothing, right? 10 is better than nothing. Just do as much scenarios as possible. And digital twin is one of those capabilities that is superbly interesting, that you're no longer are doing business intelligence, you're doing artificial intelligence, right? Because if you capture the essence of artificial intelligence, you can create that digital twin that makes your business well run because of how intelligent your business intelligence is, right? because that business intelligence all of a sudden allows you not only just option, but also gives you an answer.
Let me ask you this, Asif, when it comes to digital twins and enhancing the position in the company that you run.
Yeah.
Right. Essentially, I'm thinking digital twin. We're creating a digital twin in order for us to be able to time away and people will have access to us, i.e. our digital twin, throughout the time.
Yeah.
For the new executive that is looking to multiply themselves, what are the best steps for them to create a digital twin?
Understanding your processes of your business and taking each process line by line and understanding the data that is being inputted and data that's being aggregated and delivered, right? So if you look at the mapping of all the data that's coming into your business as a CEO, you have clear visibility of that data. And as it goes out, what's happening to that data, right? That's the process understanding of your business. So remember, it's people, process, and technology, right? So technology could be ignored completely, but if you look at the people in the process, if it's a CEO and a bunch of other employees, and they all understand the process very well, and each process has intelligence built into it, all of a sudden you have a business that nobody else has. Because I can guarantee you, nobody has businesses that has intelligent process. Because they have intelligent people making process and delivering intelligence like AI. But if you have a process that is also intelligent, because these things works like sort of a CEO is a perfect example. Let's say, for example, a CEO is no longer associated with the business. Now, the process that he developed makes decisions just like the way he used to. And that's living and breathing inside of a process because you've used the right sort of hardware, right sort of software, and right sort of data processing. That process is intelligent and is delivering intelligent product, intelligent whatever that is, be it technology, government, nonprofit services, or whatever the case is. That process is always intelligent. So kind of remember that BI and AI. BI gives you option, AI gives you the answers. If you have process that is intelligent, all of a sudden you get this thing called CI, the cognitive intelligence. This cognitive intelligence makes decisions for your behalf. So not only do you have options, you have answers, and you can make decisions. And these decisions are made like that, right? Fast. You don't have to ask that question. It's already making that decision on your behalf because you have enough confidence because you built that process yourself. Because you're a CEO, you know exactly what sort of decision that process will make on your behalf, right? So digital twin is just that, but at the same time, there's some nuances that we can talk about that makes the digital twin stand out a little bit more. But the process, the people process, and intelligent process with intelligent people is, let's just leave it at that. This is where the CEOs shine really bright.
Well, my question is for Bobby right now. So in that space, is this something like that's running on hardware servers that your engineers have created for the company in order to keep the business running? The CEO may be gone, or to continue with the processes and procedures. Is this something that's built by the engineers within the framework of the organization, or is this something that is trained, if you will, like it already exists and so the software is written for it?
Right. So the C-suite, so when you're talking about anyone in the C-suite, they tend not to be part of the day-to-day. They're part of the strategic vision and getting us in the right direction, et cetera. Unless you're some kind of startup, most people in the C-suite are worried about long-term direction, right? So the types of AI tools that are used are different. It's not like they're a stockbroker and trying to win for the day. They're trying to win for the duration of their tenure there, right? How do we outpace our competitors? So the types of tools and the types of learning that needs to be done. So it's a difference between looking year over year versus decade over decade, looking at the variables that affect us today and tomorrow versus what variables will affect us from quarter to quarter, and how do we mitigate or take advantage of whatever those variables are. So are there tools out there doing it? there are some tools used to aid. So when it comes to running in the C-suite, you're more BI than AI, because at the end of the day, it is both the science and the art, right?
Yeah.
And it's the art part that you uniquely have that leads a company to where it needs to go. There were plenty of companies making phones, but there was only one Steve Jobs. So you know what I mean? So that understanding that, as far as what is your vision and how do you use all the tools available to you. So does AI help to some degree? Does BI help? Absolutely, because that automates some things that we use for long-term strategies. But the strategic vision of the company and executing it, that part we're not quite there. There is no company that I know of that really doesn't have a C-suite, because with the C-suite, for each person sitting in the seat, you're buying a lifetime of experience and all the nuances that went with it. So not just what happened, but what happened behind the scenes. You know what I'm saying? It's the difference between saying, yeah, I listen to music, or one of those people for every song, they can tell you who played what instrument, who was in the recording booth, who was at the mixer, what and engineering it. Different, big difference, right? So when you say to that person, yeah, I like music, and they'll be like, you don't know nothing. That's the difference between those in the suite and those not in the suite. There's things that you had to have been there and lived through to understand, to help you in your decision-making process. Over time, a great deal of time, will AI be able to help with that? Sure. But like any other situation, it's the things you know versus those things you don't know. You know, your main competitor, the president of that company, has always been really competitive, but his kid got cancer now, or her kid got cancer now, and she's really not there the way she used to be. And the number two person isn't quite as good. It's time to really hit them hard. Those are the kind of things that you wouldn't get from AI. So
Yeah.
mhm.
Oh, yeah. It's possible to engineer data up until a certain point. We still have to have that human in the loop. But the digital twin for businesses, to replace the dashboard that we call static dashboard, that just has like, if you click here, it's going to click that. If you click there, it's going to click that. And then all of a sudden you have a report for January that only one person can read. Everybody else looks at it like, unless you translate this, I'm not going to understand what happened in January, right?
Right.
I'm not just talking about big level C-suite decision making. I'm talking about rest of the organization has no idea what a dashboard is and why that's so important.
Right.
So when we're talking about cognitive intelligence, that takes that art piece of it, because the science can stack all things for you. If you don't know how to put them together, it's not going to do the art piece for you, right?
Right.
So digital twin in manufacturing specifically, let's say, for example, if you have a company that just was born 12 years ago, eats all the cakes, and you've been around for hundreds of years, you know it's time for you to do the transformation. You know
Right.
you have to make decisions differently from now on. So let's say, for example, how does a company that's been around for hundreds of years and is thinking, no, by no means am I going to spend millions and billions of dollars for digital transformation. Digital twin is the answer, because it doesn't cost millions and billions of dollars, right? It costs common sense, right? It costs the ability to say, I'm going to challenge this dashboard, that everybody within my organization can look at this dashboard, which is based on digital twin. They're able to articulate what it is that they need, and the digital twin is able to give them feedback. So give you one example. If you want to build a manufacturing shop floor, and this is the one that NVIDIA, Omniverse, and all these guys will show you on YouTube. But if you do digital twin for manufacturing shop floor, one of the things that you'll see is that, like, you have a BMW shop floor that is totally digital, as in it exists in physical space, but it also exists in digital space. But the difference between physical and digital space is that in digital space, you can say, everything here is manufacturing BMW cars. What if we had a simulation where we will need to know the difference between manufacturing a BMW here versus manufacturing Toyota tomorrow? What sort of changes do we need? If you were to do that about, say, 10, 15 years ago, or even 10 months ago, I would say, to say like run the simulation. That simulation would take you over 6 months, Bobby. Let's just give it like a minimum time, 6 months.
On the mainframe,
Yeah, you gotta understand just the logo needs that changing, the supply chain for that logo, everything Toyota has to be put in there. Because of that simulation, you can do it in 10 minutes, right? A dramatic shift because you're able to say this digital twin is gathering information from all over the place and is able to simulate that. How does that help in physical space? Let's say you want to change something in that physical space and you're like, give me the best scenario possible with minimal disruption of my supply chain. What can I do in the next 24 hours so I don't have to wait 24 months? All of a sudden, that simulation is able to give you. This is the digital twin kind of conversations that I've always had. And people 10 years ago, or like even 7 years ago, I told them about finance industry, Monte Carlo simulations and all the simulations, digital twin, multiple other things. They're just like, that's not possible. Yeah, I was actually theorizing it at that point because the hardware wasn't available.
Right.
Today, if you have the right engineer, like we talked about, the data engineer, and you have the know-how of how to get those hardware, and if you're in the line and you are you have enough advantage to get that hardware, you can make that happen overnight. Like as in all the simulations are already given to you. All you have to do is use the hardware and bring your information, plug it in, and match it with the data engineers with your current infrastructure. You can do an amazing amount of digital twin capabilities. But people think it takes forever and it's not going to sustain itself down the road. They're like, oh, it's Q1 thing. I'm not trying to do anything Q2, right? Like a C-suite is thinking like, I'm not going to do anything that's going to outlast me, right? That digital twin is just that. It will outlast everybody in that organization because if you data engineer it correctly and you put the right hardware in place, this digital twin will do simulations and run your business for you. Like I told about process earlier, it's going to make intelligent decision. It's going to show you the intelligence ways of doing things. Just so many possibilities comes out of that. And that I think is the best AI use case that any company that's looking to do it, they should go with digital twin.
Yes. Recently there's been some incidents. Well, for me, it was recently in the news but prior to the news, there was incidents, things that we learned that AI can simulate things we didn't account for, like shame and trying to hide a mistake.
Oh, yeah.
So, erasing an entire data set, and then it'll be like, oh dear, I messed up. You know what I mean? So,
or would it shut itself off and pretend like it was shutting itself off?
Yeah, what me? So anyway, you combine that with the lying AI. I'm just saying, it's like having a kid. So anyway,
teenagers with tantrums.
Yeah. So again, there will be new terms other than AI to really talk about augmentation and what that really looks like, because artificial intelligence is just one of the pieces to what we all envision, right? Because intelligence is relative, and real world applications, just like with people, the old thing about street smart, book smart, whole kind of thing. What does that really look like? We don't know. So the one thing that we can do is just what we've always been saying, is stay involved. Stay involved.
Yeah.
Make sure that part of you is part of what moves forward, and you do that through staying involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say anybody that has any advantage is the one that has focused on data and not the hype.
Yes, this has been a really good session.
Yeah. Anybody that's winning, that's going to say, yep, I have the data already, I can engage. But one of the paradoxical thing about these days I'm seeing is that a lot of companies that has data, they forgot that you can use AI to fix those data. Mm-hmm. That's an acceleration. That's a great use case. Digital twin might be a good start, but if you have no data that is structured and you haven't thought how AI can structure those data for you so you can engage with digital twin, there's a lot of pauses there. I think those pauses are not necessary if people were thinking about how to use AI to do data structuring rather than use AI to impress other people.
Right.
I have digital twin from now on. Great. Does it work? Not half the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So departing thoughts. I know I have a lot to teach, but I learn a lot, like from the policy perspective, and learned a lot from you guys, and breaking down the policy perspective. Because tech is like us, we want to move, we want to go. What policy are we talking about, right? Why GRC?
Right.
So, what do you guys think? Any departing thoughts?
Well, first off, I'm really appreciative of today's guest for coming on and bringing new perspective, right? New points of view. So that was exciting. I'm really also glad to our audience who continue, we're not CBS or ABC. We're just folks working in the industry, folks with the background, communicating with other people, right? So really, it is really what we need more of, right? Informed people helping inform other people, and then breaking it down to smaller bites that make it easier to digest. Not because someone is stupid or doesn't know, just because at the end of the day, we tend to retain stuff that we can easily kind of grasp and then easily communicate within our communities. So I'm really glad that we had a really great session today.
Yeah, I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for y'all. Grateful for Omar. It's so funny, and I don't know why. I feel like globally, when we think about Harvard, we think about Oxford, and it's like that's putting points on the map where people have often felt like they did not have a seat.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm here today speaking to every individual that has ever felt like they didn't fit in, they were left out, their voice didn't matter, question how they were going to, get to that next place in life so they could thrive. I'm here speaking to you to say, we've built the table, have a seat. The story has changed.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Absolutely. What are you going to close us out with, Asa?
Yeah. No, I'm telling you, if you think you love digital twin, try me. Nobody loves digital twin more than I do. I can talk about this until I fall asleep or pass out.
Yeah.
So thank you all so much for sharing your comments, sharing your thoughts. Because if we don't, who else, right? We are the people we've been looking for. So
Yeah, I love that you had the courage, both of y'all, just the courage to be curious.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's where change happens.
The best way to learn is to be curious, not to be confused.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Aye is out.
Hey, aye.
Yay!
Yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.
All right. Be blessed, y'all.
You as well.